That you've returned from Kenya. Please tell us, what is the situation on the ground like there?
Well, people are worried about these attacks. It's not the first time it's happened. As you said in your intro, there's been some trouble on the coastal areas. There have been attacks in Nairobi. Of course, we know about the Westgate shopping centre attack, which was quite horrendous last September. In fact, I was there in April in Nairobi, and there was a bomb, an improvised bombing device in a market, and a number of people were killed. So people are worried, and I think the opposition is trying to take advantage of the situation and try and reflect that anger and disquiet that the people are putting through.
Now, Raila Odinga, the opposition leader, said this week that government is failing to protect its citizens. Does he have a point? And what is the implications of that statement?
Yeah, and he also was calling for them, I think, to pull Kenyan troops out of Somalia, because a lot of these attacks are supposedly from the Al-Shabaab movement, which is very prominent in Somalia, and resents the fact that Kenyans are in the Somalian capital. But there have also been a number of political rallies that Odinga has led, and other political parties and ordinary citizens have been part of. And there has been mounting pressure on the government to take security seriously. There's been a spike in crime, there's been a lot of unrest, and people are worried. So that's the situation. Now,
the President, Kenyatta, has indicated that the attacks was not really from Al-Shabaab, but more from disgruntled political leaders. Do you think he's got a point?
It's very difficult to prove. I mean, in the past, Al-Shabaab has been very quick to take responsibility and claim responsibility for the attacks, and they've done so here. Certainly, Odinga doesn't agree with Kenyatta in blaming local forces, and this is, I think, playing into the election cycle. Kenyan elections are very keenly fought. As we know, after 2007 elections, there was very bloody violence where over 1,000 people were killed. We're moving into the election season. Although the election is only at the end of last year, you can see this political posturing taking place. But there certainly has been an increase in insecurity. It's caused Western governments, for example, to issue travel warnings. And so tourism is down. The mood is not very positive in Kenya at the moment.
What were you doing in Kenya, by the way?
I was at a workshop that was looking at the relationship between think tanks and universities in South Africa. In Africa, in 10 or 12 different African countries. So it was very interesting kind of comparison of what sort of work they do and how they interact with one another.
Now, you've also done some research in Kenya, but who is really behind these bloody attacks? And we spoke about it because initially there have been these allegations that Al-Shabaab is responsible for them, but Uhuru Kenyatta says, no, they're not. So who is then? And Al-Shabaab has claimed the responsibility.
Yeah. So they've claimed the responsibility, and you probably need to take them at face value. But there are militants, there are local disgruntled youth, unemployed youth. There's been a radical Islamization on throughout Kenya, and particularly in the coastal areas where these attacks have happened. So although we can't be 100% certain, I think most people are pointing the finger at Al-Shabaab, and as I said, they do take credit for them. By Kenyatta saying that it may be local groups, again, I think is also feeding into the politics.
Talking about local groups, now some church leaders have advised their congregants not to attend Raila Odinga's rallies because they might incite political violence like in 2008. How true is that?
I'm not sure. There was a lot of worry on the 7th of the 7th, which was a couple of days ago on Monday. Odinga held a very big rally in Uhuru Park in Nairobi in the middle of the city. And there were fears that there was really going to be a lot of violence there. There was some tear gas fired, but it was largely peaceful. As for people warning their congregants not to go to church, that's quite a radical step. I'm not sure they're quite at that point, but we do know, a couple of weeks ago there were people watching a World Cup football game that were attacked, and there were killings there. So the situation is fluid and not very stable.
Now, opposition leaders are calling for the immediate withdrawal of Kenya's soldiers from Somalia. And Al-Shabaab said they will not stop unless those forces are withdrawn. How will this move affect the stability in the region?
Look, I don't think Kenya is about to withdraw its troops.
Why is that?
Because I think it sees this insecurity on its eastern border, and it feels it has national interest there. I think it is going to become politicized and will probably be a big election issue. And Odinga is already starting to make political capital out of it. But Kenya really is trying to be a peacemaker in the region. We know Somalia doesn't have a stable government. Yesterday there was an attack on the presidential compound in Somalia. So it hasn't had a state there since the early 90s. So Kenya doesn't want this festering enduring insecurity on its eastern border. And so it has committed troops. They now are part of the AU mission in Somalia, AMISOM. They're not under Kenyan command. But I can't see them withdrawing troops anytime soon.
But will a withdrawal release the tension and maybe bring peace, if that is the case? If that is that the only thing that Al-Shabaab is asking for?
Well, you know, they want really an Islamic state, a Sharia law state in that part of Somalia. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, can't see Kenya taking its troops out really delivering that. I'm not sure it's going to resolve the issue.
Now, all these attacks on Kenya, what is the impact of that on the economy, and especially tourism, which is one of their biggest money spinners, so to speak?
Look, it's definitely hurt them. The US and Britain have both issued travel warnings and told people not to travel to Kenya, and that does affect tourism. I think at the moment, the economy is still robust, but I saw yesterday that the World Bank has downgraded their growth forecast, and their growth was at about 4.7%. So there are effects being felt. Nobody wants this kind of instability in their country, and the rating agencies are looking at it. We know that the rating agencies were looking at South Africa very carefully, and that there was a downgrade a couple of weeks ago. The same thing is possible in Kenya with this level of instability. Speaking
to ordinary citizens on the ground that you've interacted with while you were there, what is their feeling?
Look, I was in a conference hall for most of the time, so I don't know whether I spoke to ordinary Kenyans, but when I chatted to the taxi drivers, people go about their daily business. They aren't living in fear, but and you know, a lot of these things are happening far away, apart from those that are happening in Nairobi itself. Mm-hmm. People they have a fatalistic attitude, I suppose. Nobody really likes the government. They don't think it's doing the right thing, but they go about their daily lives, driving their taxis, going to school, going out for dinner, that kind of thing.
And talking about driving those taxis, the last time I was there, it's hectic. Is it still as hectic as it is?
Nairobi traffic is something to behold, absolutely, absolutely.
Stephen, thank you so much for joining us here in studio and joining us here on AM News.
Thanks, you're very welcome.
Well, that was Steven Gruzd, the head of governance program at the SAIIA, the South African Institute of International Affairs, here in studio.